I was going to come up and insult everybody. I was going to be like, you're stupid, you're an idiot, you're too fat, you're too slow. And it just seems like really hard to do after that song. So I messed up like the whole thing. And like, what's he talking about? Why is he being mean to us? That was the shtick, and I just couldn't do it. Just couldn't do it. Let's just imagine that happened. No, but for real, I mean, some of those things that I said are just like, you're not good enough, or you're just not interesting. That's why nobody called you last week. That's why you didn't get any invitations this last month. It's just because you're just not that interesting. You don't really deserve the nice things that you have. Like you really haven't done enough to earn those things. And actually, the times that you really do look at those things and feel a sense of pride, you're just being prideful, and that's bad, right? And the thing is, when we can think of the things that have been said to us that have cut the deepest, that really hurt the most, and it's not even that, it's just the consistent abuse that we hear on a regular basis, right? The things that we hear that cut us down are spoken by ourselves to ourselves, right? The things that I said would not be things that I would ever say to most of you. But those are things that we think. When we kind of process what just happened, when we're thinking through our day, we're constantly just thinking things that are negative. I mean, not everybody. Hopefully that's not you. Hopefully that's not you. Before we get into these slides, I want to apologize. This will be the second week in a row that for some reason the font that I'm using when I'm putting the slides together is not compatible with whatever computer we have. So they're going to be a little off kilter here. And so hopefully we're going to be in Mark 1 and then Mark 4, and then we're going to kind of hit some other things. But I just want us to keep that in mind, because this is what we're going to talk about is two different instances, two very different opponents that Jesus encounters, but he addresses these enemies in the same way. And I think it has everything to do with the voice in our heads, and everything to do with how we need to be thinking fresh. And that's what we've been talking about this whole month is think fresh, this idea of, the kingdom of God is coming, but for us to really receive the kingdom, for us to enter into the kingdom, we need to repent and believe. And kind of a very generous and nice spin on the idea of repentance is thinking fresh, right? Like thinking new, changing your mind about how you view a certain thing. And so today, that's going to be how we view kind of power and things that come against us. So here's the first encounter. This is very early on in chapter 1, and 21 and following. It says, they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. And just then, a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." It's very interesting because Jesus has just come on the scene. A lot of people know he's a prophet. They know he's a powerful teacher. Like we just read, he was teaching with an authority that the other teachers didn't teach with. And this guy that's possessed with a spirit yells out, "I know who you are. I know you're the Holy One of God." And this is Jesus' reaction. "Be quiet. Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching and with authority. He even gives orders to impure spirits and they obey him." So this is kind of a struggle. It's really hard to know like what was going on. What was going on in the world then? Was it the case that they had demons that possessed them, and we don't really have that today, or we don't have that as much. It's not as prevalent today. Or I know a lot of people have different views of, like, when we see kind of the effects of some severe mental illness and that can have on people and the way that those people act is like, well, when we see that and when we hear about that looks and sounds a lot like these descriptions that we read of people in the Bible. But there's definitely something unique about this, because this guy, whatever was in him and causing him to yell out, knew who Jesus was and was afraid. Like, what are your plans? What are you going to do with us? What are you going to do with me? And it's just kind of interesting that Jesus said, "Be quiet." Now that was, he had things that he was saying that just, it wasn't Jesus' timing. Those were things that Jesus did want the world to know, that he was the Holy One of God. That's something that Jesus wants everybody to know, but it wasn't the right time for it. And so Jesus said, "Be quiet." And so there's things, I think, that come into us. I want to use that kind of analogy to think of the things that are coming from us, from inside of us. The internal things that kind of distract from the ways of God. The things that are pulling us off course. There's the who God says we are, and then there's that little nagging voice in your head that says, no, this is who you really are. And to that, I believe Jesus would say, "Be quiet." Mark chapter 4, that day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let's go over to the other side." And so leaving the crowd behind, they took him along. Just as he was in the boat, there were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. And Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. So once again, it was the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the winds, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. And he said to the disciples, "Why were you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this?" So it's interesting. There's the internal, like the guy with the impure spirit. Jesus says, "You got to be quiet." It listened. It quieted down. And the people's response was, "Who is this?" Even impure spirits, even the evil spirits listen to him. And then later on, not too long after, he says to the winds and the waves, "You got to be quiet and calm down." And they listen and they obey. And now his disciples are like, "Who is this? Who is this guy?" Even the winds and the waves obey him. And so when we think fresh, we're thinking fresh today about power. And it's from within. What are we giving power? What voices are we listening to? And it's from without. The external things that are pulling us, trying to get our attention, trying to get our lives, trying to get our money, trying to get our time. I remember there was a lot of rage in the church, especially like amongst ministers, like as I would kind of be able to communicate with different guys that were working in different places and doing things. And so, I mean, going back maybe like 15 years, I can remember sitting in Bible class and I was teaching the teens, and one of the guys, he kept falling asleep in class. And I was like, "Hey man, what's going on?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm just so tired." I was like, "Oh, he's 15 years old. He was probably up late last night and did that." And he's like, No. I went to bed at a decent time, but I had to wake up at 5 a.m. and go to soccer practice." So I ended up being pretty proud of him, because the thing was, the coach that weekend or that week had said, "You guys are just not getting it. You're not doing it well enough, and in order to get ready for the season, we're going to have practices the next couple of Sundays. So this guy in the youth group, like I said, I was proud of him. He said, Coach, I go to church. Like I can't come to practice. And so as a kind of way to like appease him, but also stick it to him, he said, okay, well, we'll do practice Sunday morning at 6 a.m. or at 5:30 a.m. And so he got up and he did 2 hours of soccer practice, ate breakfast, took a shower, and then came to church and fell asleep in my Bible class. I mean, that's like a good thing though, like, right? I mean, at least he stood up to the coach, like he spoke up, right? But how many times in that same situation have parents and students been faced with that kind of thing? Well, we've got play practice, we've got this practice, we've got this, we got to do this. If you don't do this, and if you don't show up to this, you can't play in the game, and if you don't do this, you can't do that. And we cave. And we're giving the well, what am I going to do? What am I going to say? That's the coach. Yeah. That's the coach of your 7-year-old Pee-wee league, right? You know, like it's okay to be like, hey, we can't make, and to do the opposite. And like I want, like I'm not like, hey, it's like Christians against the world. Let's like take it on and win the battle. But I'm just saying that like I would not pull those punches, you know? If they were like, well, Rob, if you don't come to practice on Sunday morning, you can't play in the game Monday night. I'd be like, I'd pull that religious card real quick. Like, I know some lawyers, you know, like if you're not going to let me play in the game because of a religious thing, like we can, yeah. But it's for real. It's just to say, like, I feel like there's so many things that we just give the power away so quickly. And we need to think fresh about that. Now, and I don't know, like, I don't know how demon possession worked, but what I kind of understand about even like today is that we have a bit of control over what we let into our lives and what we don't. And there's certain doors that if I open them up, it might be because I'm opening them up because I want certain things to come in, but there's other things that are also behind door number 1 and door number 2. That maybe I don't want, maybe I wasn't expecting those things. I didn't think that would be the monkey on the back of the thing that I kind of wanted or that I was okay with, but now I've let that in too. Now I have to deal with that. Why are those things in my head? I mean, it could just be as simple as like, you know, it's Halloween and we're going to watch this terrible horror movie and it's so fun. But now you've let all these grisly images into your head. Well, the next week, why could that grisly image be in your head? You let it in. And those are just kind of like gateways into things. And I know there's some people that take that and they kind of blow that wide open. But that is our power. And we have the ability to say yes or to say no to those things. And so what happens is we let things in. Whether it's an internal voice that we just don't quiet down, or it's the external pulls that we feel helpless. And because we're so busy, right, and we just kind of keep going along in our lives, sometimes it's actually nice when somebody's like, oh, you can't do that, you have to go this way. Oh, good, okay, thank you for letting me know. But we can just kind of go on in life enough like that and just give the power away that God is like, I thought you said you were going to be my child. Like I thought you made a commitment to live your life for me. But now you're living your life for all of these other things. And so we need to think fresh about that. And so Jesus says, be quiet, right? And so that's like the easy answer, right? And like, all right, well, how do we do this? All right, I know I do have some of those things. I have some of those thoughts. I've got those demons. And maybe we have different degrees of that. For some of us, maybe it's just that pesky little thing that's like, you're not good enough. You don't deserve it. And for somebody else, maybe it's a lot stronger. We've got those demons. Okay, yeah, I've got those things. And yeah, we've all got those. So everybody's pulling for our time. Everybody's trying to say how we have to do. And so we've got those things. But how do we overcome them? right? Like that's the question. How can we, because I'm not Jesus, right? And if I don't want there to be a storm and there's a storm, I can't just walk outside and say, wind, calm down. I'm trying to mow my lawn right now, right? I can't do that. If you can do that, let's talk. But most of us, we can't do that, right? And so that can be like, how do we do it? And I think, though, it does start with at least trying, at least understanding that you are not a helpless creature. Like God has empowered you. God has given you the ability to make decisions, to say yes to things and to say no to things. And any time that you just kind of feel like the noise is getting really loud or the pull is getting really strong, you do have the ability to say, be still, quiet, calm down. And so we have to be able to do that. And 1 John chapter 4, verses 3 through 5 says, this is the spirit of the Antichrist, right? Like a spirit that is going against Christ, which you have heard is coming and even now is already in the world, right? So would we say that there's spirits in this world that make noise in our lives that are trying to, that are essentially anti-Christ, right? Like we understand that is a lot of what's coming at us. You, dear children, are from God and have overcome them, because the one who is in you is greater than the one who is in the world. They are from the world and therefore speak from the viewpoint of the world, and the world listens to them. So the person that's the boss, the coach, the director, most of these people are from the world and speaking from the viewpoint of the world, and the people in the world are going to listen to them because that is the thing. That is the thing. I need to work these overtime hours. I need to do well on this test, or I can kiss college goodbye. I need, right? And we convince ourselves that all of these things are so important, so essential, but they're things of the world, and a lot of them are anti-Christ. I'm not talking about like the Antichrist, like some dude that's going to walk around with little horns poking out of his head that's going to deceive us all. And I'm talking about the spirits in this world that pull against us and that are against Christ. But the spirit inside of us is greater than the one that's in the world. And Titus 2 says, for the grace of God has appeared, that offers salvation to all people. It teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions, and to live self-controlled, upright, and godly lives in this present age. And so it's not just the voices of the people that are trying to get our time and attention. It's also the times that we are just tempted to do things that we shouldn't do. And the grace of God has taught us. So we have a spirit inside of us that has already overcome the world, the Holy Spirit of God. And we have a grace from God that teaches us to say no to ungodliness and worldly passions. And so the first two kind of like, how do we overcome? So the first thing is to be able to just say, be quiet. Calm down, be still. And the other is to say that, to do that within ourselves, right? To quiet yourself down. So another time, an instance in the Gospel of Mark where we see this is when Jesus has now explained to his disciples that he is going to die. And this is hard for them to really absorb and to get and to understand. And so Peter says, Lord, that's never going to happen. To which Jesus replies, get behind me, Satan, he said to him. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. And so that's what we have to think about. Like we have some of these songs are great songs that we can hear and be like, well, who does God say you are? What does God want for your life? What does God want for your future? Because maybe the boss is saying you have to do X, Y, and Z, but what does God want? Does God want you in that job then? Does God want you down that path? Does God want you a sheep to that shepherd? And so we have to think about those things. And the things, the internal voices, the things that pull us and that direct us, we have to judge those things. Is this the concerns of man, or is this the concerns of God? Earlier we read Psalm 47. In Psalm 46 it says, "Be still and know that I am God." And so there's times that we need to look outside of ourselves and say, hey, calm down. You need to be still. You need to be quiet to the outside noise. And there's times that we need to direct that internally. We need to be still and know that he is God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth. We actually just pretty much sang together Psalm 46. I'm going to read it right now, Psalm 46. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her, she will not fall. God will help her at the break of day. Nations are in uproar, kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice, the earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Come and see what the Lord has done, the desolations he has brought on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow, shatters the spear. He burns the shields with fire. He says, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted on the earth. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress." So we need to think fresh, and we need to remember who God is. We need to be still and know that God is with us. And so those first two really kind of couple together, and like sometimes it really starts with that. Sometimes, maybe the wind's not going to listen to you, but if you never say calm down, if you never make the attempt to quiet those things, then then they never will, right? Then what will happen is they will notice that you're open to hearing those things, and the noise will just get louder and louder and louder, and more voices will crop up. And so we have to be still and know that God is our fortress, and we need to be able to speak against those things and clear them out. In Mark chapter 9, this is Jesus goes up and with three of the disciples, and he's transfigured. And when he comes down in verse 14, the other disciples are with a crowd of people arguing, and a man says, "Teacher, I brought my son who's possessed by a spirit that's robbed him of his speech. Whenever it seizes him, throws him to the ground. He foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, becomes rigid. And I asked your disciples to drive out the spirit, but they could not." "You unbelieving generation," Jesus replied, "how long shall I stay with you? How long will I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought him. And when the spirit saw Jesus, it immediately threw the boy into a convulsion. He fell to the ground and rolled around, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus asked the boy's father, "How long has he been like this?" "From childhood," he answered. "It has often thrown him into the fire or water to kill him. But if you can do anything, take pity on us and help us." "If you can," Jesus replied. "Everything is possible for the one who believes." Immediately the boy's father exclaimed, "I do believe. Help me to overcome my unbelief." When Jesus saw that a crowd was running to the scene, he rebuked the impure spirit. "You deaf and mute spirit," he said, "I command you, come out of him and never enter him again." The spirit shrieked, convulsed violently, and came out. The boy looked so much like a corpse that many said, "He's dead." But Jesus took him by the hand, lifted him to his feet, and stood up. And after Jesus had gone indoors, his disciples asked him privately, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" He replied, "This kind can only come out by prayer," or as many versions say, by prayer and fasting. I like this in the Expositor's Bible Commentary. It says, Jesus' answer suggests that they had taken for granted the power given them, or had come to believe that it was inherent in themselves, the disciples. Because back in chapter 6, Jesus gives them the ability to cast out even evil spirits, and they do it. They go out and they do it themselves. So the disciples had the ability to cast out spirits. So the suggestion is they were no longer depending prayerfully on God for it, and their failure showed their lack of prayer. Really, that makes sense to me. Is Jesus is saying, because sometimes you can't just do it yourself. Sometimes it's too loud. Sometimes it's too much. Sometimes it's too strong. And when we try to put all the power in ourselves, be quiet, calm down, it's just not enough. So sometimes we need to fast and pray. And then this goes along with that, is find Jesus. And that goes back to what this man says. I do believe. Help me overcome my unbelief. And that goes back to Mark chapter 4, where Jesus is in the boat and he says, do you still have no faith? And sometimes that's the answer, right? Sometimes that's the answer. Is sometimes we can boldly be still and know that God is a fortress and he is with us, and I am in him and I am with him, and I can say, quiet down, you don't have power over me, and I can have the boldness and the confidence and the faith. And sometimes I can't do it, and sometimes I need to pray and ask God, and sometimes I need to just admit, I need Jesus. Lord, I believe, but help me in my unbelief, because these things are just too much. And so I want to invite you, as we've done every week for this series, and we'll continue to do, is respond to this lesson. Respond to this message from the gospel. Is that this is good news, is that you have more power than maybe you thought. You have more power because it's God's power that's living in you. And that there's too many times that we've given that power over to worldly things, to spirits that are really against Jesus. And so if you go, this will bring you to our website that will bring you to a thing like this where you can just fill out your information. If you've done this in previous weeks, I want to encourage you, that's okay, you can still do it this week. If you've got things from last week or the week before, they're like, I'm still working on those things, that's fine. You don't have to do it every week. But I really want to encourage people to take this. And this is all jumbled up. This is this week's thing. All right, I will commit to removing a certain distraction this week from my life. All right, so that's one commitment you can go online and make, and say, you don't have to go on there, but just sometimes pressing that button or clicking that box is just a little more help to get us to step in that direction. So maybe you know what it is. Maybe you know the thing that is calling out, that is pulling you, and the way that you say calm down is not with your words to say be quiet. It is getting rid of that thing, right? It's taking that app off of your phone. It's not going to hang out with those people this week, right? Whatever it might be, you're going to make that commitment. This is the thing that's distracting me. This is the thing that is bringing me, that is against Christ. And this week, I'm going to start by eliminating that thing from my life. Or I'm going to ask God to help me quiet the negative voices in my head. Or I will commit to praying for somebody else I know that is really struggling to find a spiritual peace. Or you can click other, and maybe there's some other way that you feel like the scriptures we've read and the things that have been said this morning are really encouraging to respond and act. And so instead of standing up and singing, encouraging you to come up front and praying over you, I want to encourage as many people as can to scan this QR code and make that commitment. You can go to our website, gracechapelchurch.com/thinkfresh, and the same response card's going to be up all day, all tomorrow, so you can think about it. Say, how am I going to respond to today's lesson?